Your clutter isn't just a mess, it's controlling your habits, stress, and even your success. Today, we're revealing the science backed way to fix it for good. Taking action is about wanting something different and taking a step towards that change by you doing, thinking, or feeling differently, even if it's uncomfortable, stepping into the unknown. Because by changing your mindset, you change your story and you'll change your life. I'm your host, Bryony Vandenberg, and this is Action Architects. Welcome back to Action Architects. Today's episode, we're going to learn about the shocking truth about our space, how it impacts our productivity, our habits, improving our health, and how it might impact us taking action in our lives. We're joined today with Dr. Kelly Cosgrove, who's done a PhD in health sciences with her focus on behaviour change. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you for sharing your time with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
I'm so excited because you've got all this extra knowledge and the science around it. I mean, I change my space all of the time just to feel a bit better, but it'd be great to hear anything that you can share with us around why is it that our space organization can really impact whether we take action or not? Where does this start for you? Why did you get into choosing your PhD research on behavior change and your inspiration?
Absolutely. So, for my entire adult life, I've been really interested and focused on health. I just became really aware of how your health and how you're feeling in your body really impacts every area of your life. So, I became really aware of that for myself. And I started to realize, when you get sick with a stomach flu or something, you just feel off and your body feels bad. And it negatively impacts every area of your life. And you're like, oh, I just can't wait to feel better again. I just feel like there's so many people who feel like that all the time now because of chronic diseases. And so I got really focused on it for that reason. I was like, I think one of the best things that I can do for myself and for others is to learn how to be healthy and be able to help other people become healthy.
How did you move from nutrition and behavior change into people's life space and behavior change? Where was the link there?
Yes, great question. So when I decided I wanted to focus on behavior change as my research focus, I started to think about what's being done already and why I feel like it's not working that well. Because I ended up shifting my focus quite a bit. And I was like, you know who's really good at causing behaviors to change and encouraging certain habits over others are companies like Coca-Cola or user experience designers who design websites to get you to subscribe to things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise. So I started to think of things through that lens of other behavioral approaches that are working really well in different contexts, and then how we can borrow that science and apply it in a way that maybe is a little bit better for people. So I started to look into how grocery stores are laid out, for example, and how that influences your purchase choices. And you're going to make those impulsive buys that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise because you have all those candy bars at the checkout line. Those things are all very intentional, including the coloring of the packaging that they use on foods or the way that menus and restaurants are laid out. Different things like that, they're influencing your behaviors every day, whether you realize it or not. And I started to think that's so impactful and interesting. And I would love to be able to find a way to use this information to help empower people to change their lives for the better, or for whatever way they want to. If they're wanting to make less healthful decisions, I mean, that's on them, but I want people to know how these environmental components are impacting their lives and to be able to use that information instead of having it be used to manipulate them without their knowledge. It's like the home is such an important basis for a lot of our health habits, and it's such a prime foundation for all of the behaviors that we do in our daily lives. And it's under our control for the most part, right? So we actually have the capability to make these different changes to our environment to promote certain habits over other ones, just like is happening to us everywhere else in our lives, except without our consent a lot of times. So it's kind of cool to be empowered and to be able to set up your home environment to promote whatever habits that you're working towards. This is another thing that I love about using this environmental design principle to shift your habits is deciding what behaviors you want to do more often and which ones you want to do less often. And the ones you're wanting to take action on and do more often, you're wanting to remove as much friction from those pathways as possible. It's kind of like a two-prong approach where you're doing one action, which is putting something out on the counter, but it works for two different reasons. And it's because it's a visual cue, but it's also making it super, super easy for you to do. Whatever you can do to make the behavior as easy as possible to engage in the moment. And so when it comes to bigger picture goals, which I know that your focus is on taking action and achieving goals and things like that, it just comes down to being very specific with what behaviors will help you achieve your goal, and then identifying how to make it as easy as possible for you to consistently engage in those behaviors in a wide range of scenarios. So, for example, I think one of the things that people struggle with quite a bit with making behavior change last. And so it is something that I think it's really important to be intentional about is where are you spending your attention? Where are you spending your time? Because oftentimes those two things are very connected. So one of the things that I love about focusing on environments too, when it comes to behavior change and habit formation, is that it's a really nice change of pace from a lot of the other interventions that are focused more on internal processes. So like improving your willpower or your discipline or things like that, and those things no doubt are really, really important, but it can be overwhelming and exhausting sometimes. And it's just like you get to this point where you're trying to accomplish all of these different goals and you're like, okay, I guess I have to make more lists and I have to come up with a different schedule and I have to like do a gratitude journal. And like it just starts to feel a little overwhelming. And so I love the focus on the physical environment because it uses a different part of your brain and you're able to actually like use your hands and organize things and feel like the weight is not so much on you and all of your internal processes to make these changes. It's like, I'm going to do this quick change in my environment. Well, quick is a relative term. Of course, it takes some time and effort to make these changes to your space, as I'm sure you know, since you just did some reorganizing on your own. But it's just a really different approach. And I feel like it can be a really refreshing change of pace if you've been struggling to make lasting behavior change and you start to get kind of down on yourself and say like, why am I struggling so much? I keep having all these goals and I feel like I've set myself up to meet them and I still struggle all the time. And so putting the pressure and the focus less on yourself for once, it's like a really great feeling. And you're like, okay, I'm going to focus on my kitchen and I'm going to do all these physical, practical changes where it's just like you're making all these changes to your environment and then you just reap the benefits without having to put in a ton of effort after that. So it's like a pretty cool way to intervene on your behavioral pathways, a lot of times in conjunction with other things. I mean, it does have the potential to be a standalone intervention. Like I have no doubt you'll eat more fruits and vegetables if you like set your kitchen up in a certain way, or you're going to sleep better if you set your bedroom up in a certain way. But it's also really great to use in conjunction with other interventions and other ways to try to change your behavior.
I love the fact that it's that mindset shift of it's not just tidying. It's actually by changing this space, changing the energy, the way it is, the flow through how I use that space, I'm probably using less of my brain, less of that mental load is being taken up by just moving about your house and trying to find the kids' bags for school or sort out a packed lunch or the dinner. Suddenly, it's just reducing the amount of stress and those micro-stressors as well. And that must just free up so much time, energy, and space to then focus that on where you want to in your life. Oh, I'm getting so excited.
I love that. And you summarized that perfectly because I always say that I focusing on your environment to promote health and productivity and well-being, to me, it has kind of like two levels to it. And the first level is exactly that, just Generally, decluttering and organizing your space and having it set up so it's not hard to maintain. Again, with the systems I mentioned, like as long as you have the right systems in place, your house will just stay relatively tidy, which is amazing. That alone has health benefits because, like you said, you're not going to experience all the stress of your environment, you know? But then on top of that, once you have your space in order and everything's good and that's your baseline, then it opens up all those possibilities of then being intentional about how your environment is designed and what habits it's promoting. So it's kind of that like two-factor approach, but even if you don't use any of the behavioral science techniques of like using friction or cues or things like that, even just decluttering and organizing your home has dramatic benefits because, like you said, it reduces stress, it frees up time. It's in general, it's going to be one of the most impactful things that I think you can do. And of course, I'm heavily biased because I'm really passionate about this, but I've seen that in my own life, when you reorganize a space, it's just literally like a sigh of relief in your body. You're just like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much of a negative impact all of the clutter was having on me until it was gone.
Is there any way that I can hack my dopamine cycle in a different way to try and counteract that?
Dopamine is a lot of it has to do with like rewards, right? And so we get that reward center lighting up in our brain when we get the notifications on our phones, and we really get used to that. But there are a lot of ways that we can mimic that or that response of like feeling rewarded in other areas in our life too. And this is another reason that I love home organization and focusing on your environment to promote habits, because organizing does have a little bit of that like dopamine cycle built into it, at least for certain people. I know this affects certain people more than others, but I'd say the majority of people, when they see a transformation of a physical space, when it goes from like cluttered and looking like really messy, one of those dramatic transformations where then everything is in order and everything has its place, it looks so satisfying, and it can really give you that reward response as well. It's just unfortunately is a little bit of a longer timeline and requires a little bit more work than opening the app on your phone, right? So you just have to know that going into it and know like this is going to be so rewarding, it's going to feel so good, and kind of visualize the outcome that you're expecting of like how amazing, even if you start with just one cabinet or one drawer, like how amazing this is going to look to see this transformation, and focus on that rewarding feeling that you get.
Do you know what? That is so true. So we rearranged, and it took a while, but I enjoyed doing it because I was doing it to feel better. I was feeling cluttered. I was feeling bogged down. So I wasn't being as productive, just generally working towards the podcast, working towards life, spending time with my kids. It sapped my energy. So I was like, right, we need to change the space. So I move things around, and I do that quite often. But every time I now walk around the corner and I see the dining table in a different place and the lounge set up in a more cozy fashion, I feel good. And I actually get that dopamine hit every time I walk past. So I can really resonate with, I've organized a drawer or a cupboard and then open it and be like, oh, that feels good. I like that.
Totally.
Is it going to impact if I just do one small thing? Or do I have to reorganize my entire house to start seeing the benefits? How can I manage my expectations to ensure that I start and continue with the organization and get as much benefit as I can?
Totally. This is a great question, and it's a really, really important topic because a lot of times I think that all or nothing approach sets people up for failure in almost any context, right? Just because it's tough sometimes to give your all the time, right? So, in the context of organizing, if you're starting with a severely cluttered home where every single room is really, really cluttered, anything that you do, any improvement you make is going to be a great thing, right? You're going to experience some benefits from it. And oftentimes it will result in kind of like a snowball effect where you just get started and you realize, oh, this isn't as bad as I expected it to be. And so managing your expectations in that way of saying, like, when you're taking on a project, I don't need to finish the whole room today. A really great tip is to set a timer, whether it's for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something that fits into your schedule. That's like a really relatively short amount of time where it's really hard to talk yourself out of it. And you set the timer and you say, I'm going to go into this room and I'm going to declutter and go through stuff until the timer goes off. The interesting thing is almost always that's enough time for you to get into a groove with what you're doing where you're like, wait, actually, this isn't that bad. And I'm going to continue. And you're able to make really meaningful progress. And if not, like 5 minutes of decluttering is way better than 0 minutes of decluttering, right? But the interesting thing is, like, and this is why I think a lot of people will hire a professional organizer because I work as a professional organizer locally. And a lot of times, when you see a more dramatic transformation, which requires a little bit more work and a little bit more dedication, right? Because you have to put in enough time to see that transformation. You get more of that dopamine effect that we talked about before, where you get rewarded. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this room looks like this now. And so it is great, like, kind of just meet yourself where you're at, where you can say, if I only have 5 minutes of decluttering, that's great. But then, like you said before, you have to set that expectation of if I only declutter for 5 minutes, I might not see that dramatic transformation in the space like I would if I dedicated a whole day, right? So it's all about getting to know yourself, getting to know how much you can do at one time. I do definitely think like starting small is really important just from a practical sense. You just kind of got to work within your means with what you're able to accomplish and do that with no judgment.
And maybe one of the best places to start is, this is going to sound random, but your cutlery drawer, because you use your cutlery drawer every single day. How an entire loaf of bread worth of crumbs gets in there every week, I have no idea. But even just taking it out, giving that a wipe, surely that's having some impact as well on making you feel like you've got better space, better energy.
And that's a great point too. I always suggest that when I'm working with a new client as well, when they say, where should we start? Because sometimes we're doing an entire home organizing project, right? And I always say, which area is impacting your life the most right now? Is there a specific room that you spend a lot of time in, or a room that is constantly causing you stress? That's always where you want to start your effort because then you see that transformation all the sooner. It can be tempting to start in like a guest bedroom because it's going to be probably a lot easier than going through like your daily use stuff, right? But it's just, you're not going to get that sense of like, wow, my life has changed dramatically because we've gone all this through all of this stuff that was, I didn't realize was having this mental impact on me all day, every day. Like it's called the silent to-do list. As you're walking through your house, you see stuff everywhere. A lot of times it's stuff you put there to remind you to do something with it. And so it's stressful. You come home after work and you're trying to unwind, but instead every room in your house that you go to is saying like, "Ooh, you forgot to do this. Don't forget about me. You need to do this one day." That's not exactly a restorative space, to be able to like reduce your stress and anxiety and get yourself ready for the next days.
I had something to say and it's gone out my head. I was like, the to-do list. That is so true. And even just, again, that mental load of all the DIY you've got to do around the house. And oh, I just need to paint that. I just need to do this. And actually, if you just did it, it would take a couple of minutes, but we procrastinate and then hold this load for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Absolutely.
You've hit me with that one.
Yeah, that is a big one. And I think it's all about breaking that cycle. So I've just started doing stuff in the moment, and it's amazing because as I'm doing it, I'm like, wait, this wasn't hard at all. And this would have just sat here for weeks if I didn't get to it right away. And now now all the flat spots are clear and I feel so much better. But
I I love that feeling. I love that feeling of decluttering and getting rid. I am definitely an advocate, but some things we can get really attached to and not change it, and that can be our demise. And I guess what we're saying is that clutter, that space, if we don't do something about it, that could be our demise on our habits, our well-being, our productivity, just because we're not getting to, we're procrastinating, and the clutter is building around us.
If you love this, that's excellent. We need to find a place where we can display it or have it where you can see it and enjoy it. If it's something that's going to be in a box in the top of the closet and you're never going to see it, is it really that important to you? And if it's not, that's okay. And I found through talking to people about different items, sometimes there's that sentimentality is actually rooted in guilt. If it's not actually something that brings you joy in your life and you don't have it on display or you don't look at it often, then you're probably not holding on to it for the right reasons. And certain things, like, you can find another home for them, for someone who will actually enjoy it. And so being able to empower yourself to give yourself that permission is really big too, to say, like, is this something that's really adding value to my life? Make sure your home is a space where you love spending time. To me, that's the route that I always try to get to with people is I want to make sure that your home is a space that feels restorative. You get home after a long day, the outside world is stressful, right? And you have very little control over it. So I want your home to be a space where you can come home and, like, a sigh of relief that says, oh, now I can, like, rest and relax and get myself recharged and ready for the next day. But a lot of times people's homes are not playing that role and it's causing extra stress. And those are the situations where it's like you probably could use a decluttering session or two in your life, you know?
Yes, I do. I've still got that image in my head of just sit down and relax and recharge. How lovely that is. And for me, it was just a simple adjustment of putting color on the walls. Because when you're in the military, all of your military accommodation, everything is magnolia, everything is cream everywhere. And I had property that I bought and did up, and everything gets painted magnolia because you're either renting it out and it's easy to quickly paint over. So as soon as we moved into our home, I needed there to be color on the walls. So every room pretty much has a different color, whether it's a shade of green or blue, usually green or blue actually with me, but just some color, because I felt like it was a transient place. Otherwise, if it was magnolia, it was just going to be a transient space, because that was the life before.
That's amazing. See, that's what I'm talking about when I say getting to know yourself and what influences you and what makes your space work for you, because that maybe isn't the case for everybody, but it sounds like you did actually some really meaningful reflection and it said, why is color so important to me? And now you understand that about yourself and you can use that information to make your home feel like a home instead of, like you said, a transient space, just a space where you're living for now. But you put the color on the walls, which is beautiful, by the way. The walls I can see. I love it. Human behavior and even the human body, everything is so different from one person to the other. So I think everything really needs to be rooted in a personalized approach for you, because that's just going to make things work better. It's going to be easier for you. It's going to feel way less like you're swimming upstream because you're doing stuff that's, like, catered to your life and your specific circumstances. And it's going to make you happier because you're focusing on the right things for yourself, you know?
I completely agree. And that is my hope for the podcast. People dipping in, dipping out, and noticing what it is for them that is going to support them, and taking that one, two, three things away and applying it into their life. I want it to be about curiosity and asking questions of ourselves and understanding ourselves more about what's just going to support us move towards our goals, even if we're not sure what those goals are. But if we create the space, if we create that mindset that we need so that we can thrive and be our best selves, then we have that opportunity to really take those steps forward. And I wholeheartedly agree. There is no one person there that is the same. And I love the statement that I read in the book, The Naked Eye. Before it was 7 billion, but now there are 8 billion worlds. We all see the world differently. We all experience the world differently. And therefore, there is no one size fit all. And I love that. So thank you so much for that, Kelly. I love it. I think we touched on the surface of all the different things we can do in our lives, but it's clear that this decluttering or organizing and changing and shifting the way that we do things can really impact our whole lives. I would love if you will come back again and we can hit on some more topics and discuss it even further and support people, maybe some listeners and some of their problems, and work through those together as well.
Absolutely. I would love that. That's kind of my bread and butter. I love to have specific issues with specific people who say, I've really been struggling to adopt this behavior and I've tried all of these things and they haven't worked. What can I do? Because it's kind of like a problem solving, troubleshooting situation where you can find out specific ways that can really help people and make behavior change a lot easier. So, yeah, absolutely. Count me in. I would love to.
Great. So you're listening right now. If you have an issue, a problem that you want help with, contact me, get involved, send us a message. Myself or Kelly are both on Instagram, and let us know and we will support you and it'll be fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me today, Kelly.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun talking to you.
It has been great. If you have any questions, please drop a comment, send me a message, connect with me, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, the YouTube channel, on the podcast channels. Any way that you like, I would love to hear from you and have a conversation. I'm passionate about this and I want to share it with others. If you think this episode can help someone, share it. If you think this episode will really support what somebody else is doing, share it. Thank you so much for your time today. And just a reminder, this is me and my experience from being a teacher in the military, working for a top university, and now globally on leadership programs and executive coaching. It's my experience and my experience of life. I am not a trained therapist. If you think you need professional advice, please seek a professional. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you soon.